Hello there, this is Elena. I talk about all things INFP, and today we're going to touch on a very controversial subject. Um, and I've been wanting to do this one for ages, but I've never gotten around to it. Don't know why. Got a little sidetracked, as I always do. um, but I want to talk about hypervigilance. Um, and I don't know whether that rings a bell for most of you. The sort of myth surrounding our sort of superpowers, if you will, to sort of know almost to a point of telepathy, of psychic sort of powers to know immediately a lot about another person. It has been said that INFPs have the ability to sort of feel or empathize with another. A lot of people I know might secretly take pride in this because I'll just be straight up honest. I used to also take pride on this, but until I later realized that this is actually not a superpower because you become good at something if you practice it for the majority of your life, right? And hypervigilance is one of these things. So what is hypervigilance? Hypervigilance is actually, and I'm just gonna be very frank over here, and that's why this is so controversial, but hypervigilance is actually a byproduct of abuse. Okay, and it could take on the form of emotional abuse or physical abuse or whatever abuse that we see in childhood or the development years throughout a person's life. And look, I'm really not sure how often INFPs look back at their childhood years and either notice or have always been aware that there was abuse going on, whether you can put a finger on it. But to be honest, if you look at all the fictional characters who are INFPs, you'll see that, and that's not even with only fictional characters. Even with celebrities, I'm pretty sure that you can sort of trace back to the roots of this INFP-ness and the sort of aura that we give off and the way we present to the world and the way we act and hold ourselves. There's some sort of, I'm not going to state that there's a direct correlation between abuse and this trait, but it's just that I do see it in myself. I'm just going to be straight up honest here. So I'm not going to go back to my childhood and my personal history, but dynamics within my family has always been a little complicated, and hypervigilance is a byproduct of us always sort of honing in our skills to sort of predict some sort of turbulence or chaos within a certain, it could be a familial dynamic, it could be other dynamics. It granted me this ability to sort of take precautions to a level of almost paranoia. If someone has a raised eyebrow, for example, towards something I say, because I sort of link that to a certain action that one of my closer caretakers would have before they erupted into this fit of anger, or if there's something that I can't predict. I never noticed that I never slept well until I went to college, which is when I first left home for good and I actually lived in my own dorm on campus. And that was the first time I felt as if I truly slept well for a night. And I wasn't aware of the fact that I didn't sleep well before then at home because I never felt truly secure at home. I know that this is getting really personal, but so hypervigilance is sort of, how a lot of people describe how INFPs are always just really overloaded sort of with information and input It could be the input of the five senses. It's smell, touch, whatever you see, the information that we get from our peripheral vision, for example, is said to be a lot more than what others might get. And this is a really subjective thing, and it's really difficult to compare it with how other personality types. But like I've always had the feeling that I feel a lot more actually than those around me. And sometimes I'll just give you a first-hand account of how I feel after going into the cinema. So the experience is actually quite it's very moving. So if I feel strongly for a certain movie or story, I'll come out of the cinema actually trembling a little bit. And it's the feeling, it depends on what kind of film it is, but it does have a big effect on me, both on the physical and emotional level. And the effects won't wear off until like a few hours later. And sometimes when I read a story that's very haunting, for example, I won't be able to sleep for days. And when other people talk about how INFPs are able to empathize with other people, I actually see that as very draining. It's a very draining experience for me. And that's why a lot of INFPs are complaining about why they're feeling really tired after meeting people or after they go to a social setting. It's all due to this thing called hypervigilance. At least that's what I think. Leave a comment below and see if you see the correlation. It might not, I'm not necessarily saying that this is due to abuse, and I'm not asking you to share with me accounts of, if you did suffer from that in your earlier childhood experience, but it could be due to another experience that you had that required you to be super or hyper attentive to the details of those around you or of your environment in order to predict something that's just basically unpredictable, and therefore you have to be super attentive, like I said. And if you ask most INFPs, I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't be happy about this kind of ability. It could come of use from time to time, but most of us just find it draining. Press like if you find it draining. I'm going to go through a list of fictional characters and also celebrities in real life that I do see a trace of where this is coming from. For example, Princess Diana and also Audrey Hepburn. I mean, Audrey Hepburn went through World War II, and although she had a really positive outlook on life, and she was, both of these celebrities are well beloved by the global community. But there's just this sense of fragileness to the way they hold themselves and the way they talk. And it's almost as if they're almost constantly aware and really taking in a little bit too much almost of what's going around them. Do name a few others if you can think of any. Anne of the Green Gables, my personal favorite INFP character. She was brought up in an orphanage where she suffered, I would say, abuse from her primal caregiver, and she had to do a lot of the very heavy house chores that others weren't willing to. If you think Jane Eyre from the book Jane Eyre, and it's actually based on the writer Bronte's personal experience, where she suffered a lot of abuse in the household where she was she grew up in, Jane Eyre, in her aunt's house, I believe, if I remember correctly, and also the institution where she was sent off by her aunt to receive her education. and all of that just really adds up to a lot of external pressure on the self to be hyper vigilant. And this could manifest in the form of how difficult it is to interact with some of the other personality types that are really direct with the way they talk and act, because we often read in between the lines to a level where it's just totally unnecessary, and therefore it's really hard to take things at face value, or just literally as they were meant by the other party. For example, when you interact with people, for example, of the ENTJ personality. I'm just taking an example off the top of my head. That's my boyfriend, and it was often really difficult for me to, at the first few stages of our relationship, for me to really take things the way they were said. So I'm gonna probably do another video on that altogether, but that's just something that I think is worthy of going over, just really thinking about it. Is that a curse or a gift? I don't know. What's your take? All right, so that's my thoughts for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.